to another EMET webinar. I am Hussein Abu Bakr Mansour, a project director here at EMET, the Endowment for Middle East Truth. I know everybody's used to our lovely founder and director, Sarah Stern, but this webinar, I'll be the one hosting it, as Sarah is currently on her way to Israel. As many of you know, EMET is a pro-American think tank and policy shop in Washington, D.C. We are extremely proud to provide our audience with our webinars featuring some of the best speakers and analysts from the US, Israel, scholars from the Middle East and everywhere, such as today's brilliant guest, Cynthia Farahat, the author and analyst. But we are more than just a think tank. Every week, we are on Capitol Hill, where we meet with many offices of the US Congress and foreign policy staffers whom have come to trust us, rely on us, and depend on us for up-to-date, accurate, and reliable information about everything occurring in Israel and in the Middle East, and most particularly about the issues surrounding the attempts to revive the nuclear agreement with the Islamic Republic of Iran and the current political conditions and protests. As many of you know, Iran is witnessing a wave of protests against the oppressive, repressive, and anti-women practices of the Iranian morality police. These protests were triggered after the Iranian morality police tortured to death Mahsa Amini, a young Iranian woman, I think she was only 22, after she was arrested because some hair was showing off her veil. We support Iranian women, we support their rights, and we support the rights of all Iranians for a better future away from this women-obsessed, hating, fanatical regime that is currently seeking nuclear weapons for their anti-Semitic obsession to destroy the state of Israel. We would like to see a better Iran, an Iran that is friendly to its neighbors, and including Israel. EMET gets absolutely no funding from any government and depends entirely on viewers such as you for support. So please consider making a meaningful contribution at emetonline.org. Or please consider sponsoring a webinar. For this, there is a link that you will find in the email invitation to this webinar. By this time, most people have heard one way or the other of the Islamist political movement, the Muslim Brotherhood. The Brotherhood originated in Egypt in the 1920s as a fascist-inspired movement and became the mother of all subsequent Islamic and jihadist political movements in the Middle East and internationally. They rose to prominence in the Middle East during the political upheaval of the Arab Spring in 2011 and obtained power in Egypt and Tunisia and other places. They were removed forcefully from office afterwards. They also have a presence in the US through the notoriously anti-Zionist and anti-American group, the Council for Islamic American Relations, CARE, an organization that is designated as a terrorist organization in different Muslim countries. The Palestinian branch of the Brotherhood, the Islamic resistance movement of Hamas, has been ruling the Gaza Strip ever since Israel evacuated it unilaterally, and uses the Strip as a launching pad of its attacks on innocent Israeli civilians and citizens, and various operations targeting the Israeli Defense Forces. The Brotherhood is strongly tied to the ruling autocratic regime in Turkey of current President Erdogan and the ruling family of the natural gas wealthy Emirate of Qatar, and uses its international news and media network, Al Jazeera, for its propaganda. So today, we have our guest speak about the Brotherhood and some of their lesser-known aspects. Cynthia Farahat is an Egyptian-American author, columnist, political analyst, counterterrorism expert, and fellow at the Middle East Forum. She co-founded the Liberal Egyptian Party in Egypt, which advocated for peace with Israel, capitalism, and the separation of mosque and state. She studied Islamic jurisprudence for more than 20 years and co-authored a book, Desecration of a Heavenly Religion, which was officially banned by Al-Azhar University in Cairo in 2008 for its criticism of Egypt's blasphemy law. Farahat landed on an Al-Qaeda affiliated group hit list and was officially banned from entering Lebanon for her work fostering regional peace. For almost a decade, she received daily death threats from Islamists. After her brother was tortured, her friend was murdered, and Islamists tried to assassinate her, Farahat immigrated to the United States. Farahat has testified before the U.S. House of Representatives, briefed more than 200 congressional offices, and advised intelligence and law enforcement agencies. She received the Speaker of Truth Award from the Endowment for Middle East Truth, EMET, and the Profile and Courage Award from Act for America. Her writing has been published in many national and international outlets, and her work has been translated into more than 15 languages. Our viewers are encouraged to leave questions for Cynthia in the Q&A function in Zoom. Cynthia, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Cynthia, tell us, why did you write a book on the Muslim Brotherhood when we already have so many books on the topic?
Well, I didn't want to write the book at all. Let's start there. I absolutely had to. This book puts a target on my back and on my family's back. As you said in your introduction, that they have kidnapped and tortured my brother and made me listen while they were breaking his bones. That you never recover from an experience like this. They have murdered one of my good friends execution style in front of TV cameras, and I missed my assassination attempt because I got a fever. These are absolute monsters. They are genocide. They're genocidal criminals, and I do not use the word genocide lightly. I do indeed prove in my book that their death toll is in the millions, because they have directly ruled the country of Sudan when Omar al-Bashir was president. He was a card-carrying member of the Muslim Brotherhood, according to their own documents and their own words. And he was the first sitting president to be indicted as a war criminal by the International Criminal Court. So the Sudan project and the Sudan model was actually the model that the Muslim Brotherhood aspired to replicate across the Middle East. And that is not an opinion, that's information. The reason I wrote the book is because there is no book about the Muslim Brotherhood's secret apparatus at all in English. And they often propagate to the Western targets that they have dismantled their terrorism apparatus. Sometimes they say the 40s, sometimes the 50s, sometimes the 60s. When you go to US academia, ask any professor, they will tell you, oh, the terrorism apparatus of the Muslim Brotherhood, something that belongs in the past. It's history. They have denounced terrorism. And that was that was actually news to me after I came to America. I've never heard that, because they do the Arafat thing. They say something in Arabic and it's complete opposite in English. While they are denying the existence of the secret apparatus in English, they boast about its existence in Arabic. So I wrote a book that heavily relied on their own words, on their own internal documents, on their own speeches. And I have almost 945 footnotes. It's an indictment to get them designated as a terrorist organization, because that's exactly where they belong. They are the incubator for terrorism and have been responsible for not only establishing but also operating the vast majority of Sunni terror groups around the world. So I had this information and I absolutely had to share it and take it to the American people so they can have the evidence in their own hands, so they can pressure politicians in the United States to take this matter with extreme seriousness. The most dangerous aspect of the Muslim Brotherhood operation, sadly, is not terrorism, but their covert action against America and against every targeted nation. So I extensively discuss these elements. I also share documents that have never been revealed to a Western public, and sometimes to also some documents to the Middle Eastern public as well. So there are tons of breaking news. I counted over 100 new pieces of information, and then I decided to stop because it was taking too much time of my work, from my work, to count the new information. So it took a lot of effort to write it, and I wrote it under horrendous conditions, but it had to get out.
Is this your book, Desecration of a Heavenly Religion?
No, it's my new book that was just released, The Secret Apparatus, the Muslim Brotherhood's Industry
this is the book we're talking about today. Yes.
Yes, it's the one we're talking about today, and it was just released, and as soon as it was out, it was an Amazon #1 bestseller. So it's very exciting.
That's great to hear. Your effort wasn't in vain. I'm glad to hear that people are reading your book.
Thank you.
I have a few follow-up questions. Actually, I have a million of questions. I think our audience is starting to develop a million of questions too. But let me start by asking you actually about the Sudan model. Yeah. You've mentioned the Sudan model, and this is, I think, one of the things that people don't really hear about. Why don't people hear about the Sudan Muslim Brotherhood experience?
Because they do not hear a lot about the Muslim Brotherhood in general. Hassan al-Turabi, he's a Sudanese Muslim Brotherhood leader who died in 2016, and he was a close friend of Osama bin Laden, said on Al-Jazeera that the Muslim Brotherhood, control the narrative about the organization in US intelligence agencies. They said that they're the ones who control the narrative, and bragged about it. And I have his exact quotation in my book. And that is the reason why we do not hear about the Sudanese model, that this is actually the aspirational blueprint for the group. That's why we don't hear about it. That's why we don't hear a lot of the other things that we discussed.
Well, chief of which apparently is the secret apparatus, the subject of our book. So let's go right there. What is that? What is the secret apparatus?
So the secret apparatus, the word itself, the Muslim Brotherhood borrowed it from Joseph Stalin's regime. The Muslim Brotherhood did something extremely savvy. They have studied a lot of the fascist and criminal and terrorist organizations throughout history, and they took elements from each group. Like, for example, according to Ali Ajmawi, a former leader of the secret apparatus of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is their terrorism wing, said that they are the revival of al-Hashashin, which are the assassins. That's what they say. That's not my personal conspiracy theory. These are their own words. They say they are the revival of the assassins. The assassins was an 11th and 12th century Shia cult in Iran. It was extremely murderous and bloodthirsty. The word assassin itself derives from al-Hashashin, which became assassin and then became the assassins. And they say we are the revival of the assassins. They also looked at the regime of Joseph Stalin. They borrowed his internal governing power apparatus, which combined a general office or a general operation or general bureau and a secret apparatus. And they borrowed this terminology from the Soviet Union, and they structured their internal group based on that on Stalin's structure, according also to their own words. They also borrowed something else from the mafia. The nucleus of the Muslim Brotherhood is called the family. They copied exactly the structure of the Sicilian mafia with the same terminology as well. It's quite incredible. They have copied inside the structure of the secret apparatus. They copied first it was the Communist Party in Germany, and that had something called the N group and the M group, and the N group was the the intelligence apparatus inside the secret apparatus, and the M group was the military apparatus inside the secret apparatus of the Communist Party. Hitler also adopted the structure in his party, and they still till today uphold that same structure of civilians and militants in the secret apparatus leadership. And when I say militants, I mean individuals who are affiliated with official armies in the countries that they target. And that leadership is responsible for setting forth the policies for groups such as Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, Al-Nusra Front, Al-Jamal Islamiyya Islamic Group, Al-Takfir wal-Hijra, excommunication and immigration. They were even involved in the founding of Boko Haram. They were involved in the founding of the Taliban. I actually was struggling to find a group that they were not involved in founding and operating it. That's something I'm proving in my book as well. It doesn't stop with them founding. According to the secret apparatus bylaws, a Muslim Brotherhood member, before starting an independent terror group, he has to pretend to leave the organization first. That's according to their words. So much so that his own family members, his own wife and children are not allowed to know that he maintains his membership in the Muslim Brotherhood. So when you hear former Muslim Brotherhood, Osama bin Laden, no, he wasn't a former Muslim Brotherhood. Actually, I proved that he died a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. So was the other two Al-Qaeda leaders, Abdullah Azzam and Ayman al-Zawahiri. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, member of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's hard to ignore these patterns in behavior. Someone would have to be really blind to see the evidence in my book and not come to the conclusion that they are an incubator of terrorism, and that is the secret apparatus, and that is the governing body of the Muslim Brotherhood. The so-called general bureau, or whatever they call it, sometimes the general office or the general apparatus, that's a PR facade. Wow.
Well, as I said, a million questions, and I don't know where to start from. Let me ask you the first one. The name of Emet is truth. Emet is a Hebrew word which means truth. So in your most objective opinion, and feel free, this is our audience is one of the most truth-seeking people that I've seen. Do you believe that the Muslim Brotherhood is responsible for the importation of totalitarian and communistic ideas into Muslim societies that basically kind of snowballed afterwards, and they were the ones who were responsible for bringing these ideas?
So I of course, I believe that your audience seeks truth. I can't tell you how much I love your organization and how much I love Sarah Stern, and all of you guys are just incredible people. So yes, I track what is called the Islamic Awakening Project from its beginning. The Islamic Awakening Project, which is called in Arabic Mashru'a Sahwa al-Islamiyya, I track its origins to the last 2 centuries of the last 2 decades of the 19th century. And the proponents of this project was the Kaiser Wilhelm II and the Ottoman Empire. Wilhelm II, his advisor Max von Oppenheim, once said in one of his memorandums that he is going to unleash Muslim fanaticism bordering on insanity. That's a quote. And he was able to do this with the assistance of the war minister of the Ottoman Empire, Enver Pasha. During World War I, or a little bit before World War I, they started recruiting Muslim clerics from across the Middle East. And also they recruit others who are not Arab or Middle Eastern. And among the 2 most important recruits that I have found was a gentleman called Sheikh Sharif al-Tunsi from Tunisia, and another one called Mohammed al-Khidr Hussein, who is from Algeria. These 2 men with Max von Oppenheim started to write a newspaper called Al-Jihad, or the Jihad. It was in German and it was in Arabic, and it was circulated among Muslims at the time. Now, that's how it officially began. So this Islamic awakening, that was its beginning. Now, I have made the connections, and it took me a very long time to look for the connections between the original proponents, and of course that was in cooperation with a man called Jamal ad-Din al-Afghani, who was, in my opinion, an Ismaili Naziri Shia assassin who believes in the cult of the assassins. Also, I believe he was one of the main leaders of this project also around that time. But I looked for a very long time to find the link between these guys and the Muslim Brotherhood, and I found it. And that link is Mohammed al-Khidr Hussein. Oppenheim's spy later became the head of Al-Azhar University in 1954. But before that, he was operating a group called Islamic Ethics Association. The incredible thing that I also found, and I found the historic root of them using non-governmental organizations as fronts for jihad and for criminal activity and for smuggling weapons. And I found the origins of that project, and the first organization they started, Islamic Ethics Association, was one of these secret societies. And Al-Khidr Hussein was there when Banna joined it, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood. So that's the link. And then the Brotherhood, of course, took it to a whole new different level. That was and it happened over waves. Like when you look at pictures of Iran, pictures of Egypt, pictures of Afghanistan in the 60s, you'd think that you're looking at a picture of women in Sicily. It looks different. The cultures were different. Now, the shift that really happened, that really destroyed the Middle East, is something that occurred on the 3rd of October, 1979. I have spent countless hours looking at declassified documents on the CIA library public website, and I found an incredible document that was titled Covert Action. This document states that the US government met with leaders of Arab and Islamic countries, and they discussed funding the Afghani militants against the Soviet regime, and with weapons and with millions of dollars. But that's not the breaking news. The breaking news in that document was that they also decided to begin a massive wave of pro-jihad propaganda. And that was actually the largest propaganda campaign to recruit for jihadism in the history of the world. So that is why prior to 1979, the pictures look different than they look after 1979 of all the women in these countries and even the way the countries look. So these are things that so this is the long answer to your question. I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine. I'm sure our audience is enjoying this, horrified, but it's very insightful. Now, you mentioned 1979, and that brings us to another very topical subject. Iran. Is there a relationship between the Muslim Brotherhood and Iran?
Unfortunately, yes. I also did something that I don't know anyone else did, which is we all know that there is conflict between Sunnis and Shias. Everybody knows that there is a historic conflict between the two sects. But I have tracked 14 centuries of strategic, military, and ideological cooperation. So there is a history of cooperation that's as significant as the history of the division. And that's why, like, I'll give you an example. In 1938, Ruhollah Khomeini, before he became an Ayatollah, visited Hassan al-Banna in his office in 1938 and was mesmerized by Hassan al-Banna. Now, supreme leaders in Iran call themselves supreme leaders because that's what Hassan al-Banna called himself. They were so inspired. The current supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, translated 2 of Sayyid Qutb's books, who is the terror Muslim Brotherhood theologian. He translated them from Arabic to Persian, and they are a required reading for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. The Muslim Brotherhood requires its students and its militants to read Khomeini's book, Islamic Government. So there is definitely an ideological alliance. When the Muslim Brotherhood says that it is the revival of a Shia cult of the assassins, is because they have been able to export a lot of the elements of Shiism and Shia theology from dissimulation and concealment and adopt them into their Sunni theology and make it acceptable to engage in dissimulation and engage in concealment and secrecy. And they have successfully, they did something that is so extraordinary, and that's why you should admire that kind of vigilance between the two sects. Hassan al-Banna delivered, and his organization delivered on a 273-year-old Shia dream. Nader Shah, the ruler of Iran, in 1743, attended something called the Najaf Convention. He demanded that the Ottomans, the Sunnis, recognize the Jafari Shia school of jurisprudence as a 5th school of jurisprudence. In 1743, everybody laughed it off. Guess who delivered on that dream? Sheikh Mohammed Shaltut, who is the head of Al-Azhar and a member of the Muslim Brotherhood in 1963. Even after Banna died, he has been trying to push for this for a while, and they finally delivered upon Nader Shah's vision, and they fulfilled all of his demands. So when we see cooperation between them today, like you would think, for example, when Iran and Iraq were fighting, you would think a Sunni group like the Muslim Brotherhood would take the side of Saddam Hussein, but no. They came out, publicly said the Iranian revolution is our revolution. That's a quote. So it's not who is propagating all the time in Arabic for Iranian nuclear weapons? The Muslim Brotherhood. Who gets funds from, they get funds from Iran. They have an official Brotherhood, Muslim Brotherhood office in Iran since 1979. The second plane to land in Iran after Khomeini perpetrated his revolution was the Muslim Brotherhood private jet. The first one was Yasser Arafat. The second was the Secret Apparatus wing of the Muslim Brotherhood. So I reached a point where I don't even see them as two separate entities. It's just two different facades of the same exact project.
Thank you. That's very enlightening. I think the differences between the Sunni and Shias are one of the least well understood aspects of Middle East culture and politics. You talked about something called the International Apparatus. What is the International Apparatus?
Oh, so the International Apparatus is a subdivision of the Secret Apparatus. And it is the umbrella organization under which all Secret Apparatus chapters communicate and enforce make sure that the Muslim Brotherhood bylaws are enforced in each country, in each chapter. Some experts say that Muslim Brotherhood chapters in each country are independent. No, they are not. People who say that are either naive or ignorant, or like me, someone tried to bribe them to say that, because I was literally offered a bribe to say that. So you should, when you hear that these chapters are independent, you should really be skeptical of that statement. Now, the International Apparatus has its own bylaws, and these bylaws govern the action of each member of the Muslim Brotherhood outside Egypt, where their headquarters used to be. Right now, the headquarters are in Turkey. But outside of the headquarters of the Muslim Brotherhood, they are all governed by the same rules. For example, they are not allowed to advocate for any policy or social or any social cause that is not adopted by the Muslim Brotherhood. They are, for example, supposed to look at themselves as soldiers and not individuals. If they are operating in any kind of job, they are required by their leadership to give the secret of their trade. Whether they're cleaning toilets or working in an intelligence agency, they have to exactly say who's who, what's happening, and daily record every single aspect of what is going on around them. And that's what the international apparatus connects all the militant and non-militant groups of the Muslim Brotherhood. And it's usually also headed by the secret apparatus leader in each country, because each country has a secret apparatus leader and a deputy. And now all this is information and facts. Now, my opinion and analysis, I think I identified who that person might be in the United States, and I discuss it in my book based on specific identifiers and behavioral patterns. So it's a horrific structure that's also nobody ever talks about because of the infiltration.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's ask you one last question, and then get more questions from the audience. You just mentioned the U.S. I think everybody now, they can see many of our viewers are already asking this. What's going on in the U.S.? Can you talk to us about Brotherhood Presence in America?
Oh, it's the stuff of nightmares. If I say it out loud, it sounds bizarre. It sounds so bizarre. They have infiltrated every major organ in the United States, whether it's governmental or non-governmental. They just President Biden just appointed 3 Brotherhood Islamists to a DHS panel. President Barack Obama infested his regime with members of the Muslim Brotherhood. Academia. I wrote an article about a man who has publicly on his social media admitted to his involvement in a genocidal act. It was actually a massacre where 506 people were murdered and maimed, and the gunman holding an AK-47 shooting at random civilians at his terrorist attack. He described him as a man seeking God while he was shooting at these innocent people. And this man is a professor at Union College. He's called Ahmed Abdul Basit Muhammad, and he's a professor at Union College. That's the extent of the disaster we are in. He's teaching your children. There are camps to start finding children for jihadist work in America. The Muslim Brotherhood scouts in America. I have all this evidence, even with pictures. It's utterly shocking. The webmaster of Al-Qaeda lobbies Congress. I have this also in pictures. Utterly shocking. Called Mazen Mukhtar. The US government accused him of running a mirror website for Al-Qaeda. And then Governor Chris Christie, we thought he was going to indict him. I think it was 2006 or 2007, but he lets him go. And this man is still raising funds. He's still involved in this very sinister activity of raising money. And he lobbies Congress and takes selfies with politicians like Senator Cory Booker. In Hollywood, if you know, you probably know the actor Amr Waked. This actor Amr Waked, he is affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood, as well. If you Google him, you will see that he was on video involved in illegally interrogating a kidnapped and tortured individual inside Safir offices that were called the Muslim Brotherhood slaughterhouses. Amr Waked was involved in these horrific acts on video, and he's now in Hollywood. So they're everywhere. And that's why I took my case to the American people and wrote this book as an indictment, so it could actually withstand the scrutiny of court to try to get them designated as a terror group and stop them.
Have you now we have a lot of questions from our audience. Have you been called to consult with the FBI, CIA, US law enforcement? Is there anybody doing anything about this? CARE?
No one is doing anything about it. You know that the greatest, biggest terror recruiter on planet Earth lives in Manhattan? He's called Bahgat Sabir. This man streams videos on how to create bombs and how to create weapons from your household appliances. He's allowed to recruit terrorists. I have reported him several times. What is happening about that? Nothing. Nothing at all. I have reported the self-admitted mass murderer in Union College. What's happening? Nothing. Nothing at all. Because I just can't believe how bad things are.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think you have to see it to believe it. And I assume that all of this information in your book, and I call our audience to actually find Cynthia's book. I think Naomi has a link in the chat. We have a lot of questions still. A lot of them are about the United States and about CARE. Why is CARE still a legal body. CAIR is designated, at least I know of one country, the United Arab Emirates, the Abraham Accord country. They actually designated CAIR as a terrorist organization. Why is CAIR not just illegal, but they have speakers, they contribute with progressive movements, they meet with politicians. Why they're still legal?
I was told by more than one lawmaker that State Department and the CIA are against designating the Muslim Brotherhood as a terror group because they're working with them. If they designate them as a terror group, CAIR would end. There'd be no CAIR. They'd all be either in prison or on terror watch lists. So there is something extremely nefarious between the United States, between State Department and few intelligence agencies that's going on between them and the Muslim Brotherhood. And I have been told this by a gentleman in State Department during one of the meetings, my first meeting with State Department. This man is still there. I think he's a sociopath. He used to taunt me because I'm Coptic, and he's very, very disturbed. I told
is this
him,
a State Department official you're speaking about?
yes, very disturbed sociopath. And when I told him we have to stop the Muslim Brotherhood, he said, oh, no, there is no we want the Muslim Brotherhood. You are on your own. Okay, that, and he would call me and he would taunt me with how much power and how much they were working with them. Even went as far as showing me the Muslim Brotherhood so-called constitution when they were in power in Egypt before anyone else saw it. It gave them, I think there's a lot of people who are disturbed, narcissistic, sadistic, have inferiority complexes in these positions of power, and they think that, or maybe they have an admiration for these tyrannical and criminal entities like the Nazis or the Soviets or the Islamists. So I think it's a combination, and some of them are just plain ignorant. So all these combinations contribute to that.
Is anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism some of the guiding principles of the Muslim Brotherhood?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The Muslim Brotherhood believes, and they have said this like 1 billion times publicly, that their mission is to kill all Jews and Christians. Just kill them all. And they also have a genocidal program for Muslims. They call it the blood tax. And the blood tax program means that any Muslim who is not contributing to some capacity to jihad, whether through money or through funding or through military operations, they are considered infidels, and they should be ritually sacrificed to Allah so that God would forgive them for their sins of abandoning Sharia law. That's according to the lunatic Hassan al-Banna. He wrote this in one of his essays that I translated in the book. So yes, absolutely. And that's one of the main reasons why they're allying with Iran, because they believe that a nuclear Iran will be able to deal with the situation with the Jews. They have been working with Nazis from day one. They even claim that one of their leaders was protesting alongside Hitler in the early 1920s. I don't know whether that happened or not, but that's a claim that they are actually bragging about. Do you know that there are Islamists that call their kids Hitler? If you remember, one of the famous government officials in Mubarak's regime, he was the head of a Raqaba al-Idariya. I don't know how to translate that department to English. He was called,
it's like the Inspector General.
And yes, he was called Hitler Tantawi. His first name was Hitler. So, yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the Inspector General, have you tried to report the State Department official to the Inspector General of the State Department? I assume that the IG would like to hear about something like this.
No, I didn't, because that is the general philosophy of State Department since FDR. I call it a policy of dictatorship maintenance, whether it's dictators in the traditional sense or whether it's dictatorial societal and religious norms. I believe that this is their policy. The general policy. There are exceptions, of course, but that has been the general policy since FDR was supporting Stalin. So I think it's a lost cause, and that's why I took my fight to the streets. And I said, my people, I'm American now. Americans are my people, and we need to do something about that. Make it an election issue.
Yeah. Well, I'm sad to hear this, and it's extremely worrying that such people would be in our State Department. What about universities? Are they also heavily present in our universities?
Oh, yes. Yes. I looked at Middle East programs in a lot of universities, and it's just propaganda. Just propaganda. It's Islamist propaganda. And some of these, and honestly, some of the professors belong in Gitmo with their track record. Should be in Gitmo, not in universities. Honestly. So universities, I gave up. I gave up on it's a lost cause.
Yeah, I just want to prevent misconceptions. We don't mean that all Muslims believe this, right?
No. That's actually, do you know who my biggest supporters are? Muslims. Yeah. Who are the people that support my work? Who are my readers? Muslims. Yeah. Who are my best friends? Muslims. Who are the family members that support me? They're Muslim. Muslims are the first victims. My brother's best friend, they kidnapped him and removed his scalp just because he was a Muslim kid. So that's why they believe in murdering 99.9% of Muslims under what we call the blood tax. So no, I actually incredibly never. I only got maybe in 10 years, sorry, in 8 years, 2 negative or 3 negative messages from Muslims. The overwhelming support and love I get from the Muslim community is humbling, and they send me gut-wrenching messages. And by the way, they're unable to speak out. They're persecuted in America. Newsflash, they're persecuted because when you give access and control to the representation of the Muslim community to people like CARE and ISNA and USCMO and Muslim Americans for Palestine and all these Muslim Brotherhood front organizations, these guys are afraid to speak out. A Muslim gentleman told me that when he was in New York, he was beaten up at a mosque and severely assaulted because he criticized the Muslim Brotherhood and he was too afraid to file a police report. But he said that's the norm. They're not allowed to speak out against them. They could lose their jobs. They could get isolated from the community. So no, Muslim Americans are forced to not engage except for very, very small percentage. It's almost statistically insignificant, the number of radicals in the Muslim community, but they are the ones in power.
Yeah. So yeah, just to reiterate, this is by no means means that the majority of Muslims are Muslim Brotherhood. The majority of Muslims are just people trying to raise their kids and have barbecues on the weekends.
Yes.
Now the question is what to do about all of this. How can we eradicate the presence of the Muslim Brotherhood, at least from the United States?
It's not going to happen by the current administration, that's for sure. Democratic administrations, unfortunately, tend to have believe in that they have some sort of alliance with the Muslim Brotherhood. President Trump has discussed this issue, and I believe he was going to get them designated as a terror group in his second term. That's information, not opinion. And he didn't get the chance, but I hope that the next Republican president will act upon it. But more importantly, we in America still have not lost our First Amendment rights. We in America still are able to change the course of actions with our votes. We have to make it an election issue. Call your congressman, call your senator. Where do you stand on the Muslim Brotherhood issue? And if and they better try to give you an answer instead of these oh, thank you for your call, we'll get back to you and you should make a point. If you should tell them, if you continue to support the Muslim Brotherhood, I'm not going to vote for you. This has to be an election issue.
Okay, I want to play a devil's advocate for a minute and say, well, Cynthia, you did a lot of work and you did a lot of research and you got a lot of information, but out of this, you basically wrote a story about this big body of like a movement with like this octopus with a head, but those are actually different people. Let's say I'm a Muslim Brotherhood member or a CARE member here in America and working legally or competing in elections in other country. What do I have to do with like the lunatics who go these stuff in Boko Haram and the lunatics who do this stuff in Syria? Those are different people. They want to say whatever, but we're just different people doing different things.
So if you are a bookkeeper for the mafia, you still get in trouble for being a bookkeeper for the mafia.
Right.
Okay. That's it. You're a member of it. You want to be a peaceful member of society? Don't be a member of the mafia or MS-13 or become there it is. We solved it. Even if you are not decapitating infidels yourself, you are contributing either in numbers, either in making them look like a political organization. So yeah, it's a criminal enterprise. Anyone who affiliates with it is a criminal.
Thank you. I wasn't defending. I was just merely
but it's a great point because it's a great point because they say that. I've been told that. I've been told that.
Yeah, this you would hear. The reason I ask this question for our audience, you would hear this. This is a standard way, of answering or talking about the Muslim Brotherhood in the academy. I just graduated recently from graduate studies Middle East in George Washington University, and there was one professor who literally said, and he came, by the way, he had a Jewish last name. He said, whenever I talk about, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, I split hairs deliberately. So you have a lot of people who's convinced that they should defend this sad reality. All right, what about other Western countries? I mean, we talked about the United States. Do we know of Muslim Brotherhood presence in, let's say, Canada, England, Germany, France?
Oh, it's 10 times worse.
Where?
In other countries, specifically in Europe. Europe is 10 times worse. They have more support because, for example, America, the beauty of America is it's so easily to assimilate and become part of the American culture and still have your lovely heritage, right? I have met Muslims in the UK who have been born there and lived there for 20 years and do not know a word of English. True story. I met these people. They do not know how to say how are you doing in English, because they are allowed to completely segregate in these enclaves, in these camps, where they do not. I talked to some 18-year-old who has never seen a swimming pool, has never listened to music. That's why when ISIS was recruiting, it was able to recruit a lot of Europeans, a lot more than Americans, because the presence of Islamism there is so much worse than here. Europe, the leftist, the severe radical Marxism in Europe makes them susceptible to accepting other totalitarian ideologies that are similar.
Yeah. Of course, we all know Europe is the originator of a lot of fun things and only merry and happy things. I want to apologize to all our viewers who sent us questions. I've received a lot of questions. This is like one of the most webinars that received questions, very understandably. And I'm not going to be able to get all of them. We're reaching the end of our time, so I want to apologize in advance about all these questions. But I'm going to go ahead and ask you this last question. So Israel, just the Abraham Accord, signed the Abraham Accords a few years ago with multiple Muslim countries. What is the stance of Muslim governments on the Muslim Brotherhood now? What are they doing? And are they on our side in this, or on their side, or somewhere in between?
So when you look at a country like the UAE, they have a very refreshing attitude that's completely unapologetic. They're straight shooters. They say things in public that are so extremely courageous. So a country like UAE has very black and white stances regarding the Muslim Brotherhood. They view them as a bunch of terrorists and mass murderers, and rightfully so. And they've designated a lot of their groups as terror entities. And Saudi Arabia, surprisingly, also joined the bandwagon of countries that have absolutely no longer any kind of tolerance. Egypt is a problematic situation because while the president of Egypt is trying to fight them, the more powerful organization, Al-Azhar University, is almost fully controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood. And it has more legislative powers than the Egyptian president himself. So Egypt is not in a great situation. Bahrain also joined the ranks of countries that are anti-Brotherhood. Tunisia, recently also Sudan. Countries that, Qatar, for example, the leadership of Qatar are card-carrying members of the Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan, in my opinion, is the head of the Muslim Brotherhood and its secret apparatus. That's according to my analysis. And I say in the book exactly how I came to this conclusion. So that's analysis, not information. I always love to draw the distinction because I do not lump my opinion with facts. So this is the short answer. But the Abraham Accords are historic. They are changing the world in a incredible way. And I'm seeing a lot of the anti-Semitism dissipate in a lot of these cultures. So I'm very hopeful for the Middle East. Unfortunately, I can't say the same here.
Yeah, I actually share. I'm really sad to say this to all our people. Neither I or Cynthia were born here. We're both raised in Egypt, in a Muslim country. And if you read even my previous own writings and see my previous webinars, you'll be seeing me saying the same thing. Actually, the Middle East currently is in a very hopeful spot. America is not, which is alarming. Not a cause for hysteria, but yeah, there are a lot of things that need to change. Cynthia, before we end, people are asking how can they communicate with you?
Well, you can communicate with me on LinkedIn, on my official Facebook page. You can contact me on my website, cynthiafarahat.com, on Twitter. I always respond to messages on social media, so I would be happy to answer their questions if they send them to me.
Amazing. I'll tell actually a brief story before we close here. From actually a meeting I had with an Emirati official in the Interior Ministry of the government, the UAE. They are stunned and puzzled by the refusal of Western officials. He talked specifically to me about America and Germany, of taking their advice about Islamism and how to deal with the Islamist group. And he couldn't understand why. From my own experience in the United States, in the prestigious academia of America and other American institutions, they think they know better. American, mostly liberal, and everybody thinks that they know better, liberal or not. But when it comes to these issues, American liberals sit with Middle Eastern officials who tell them about the Muslim Brotherhood and its problems. And those American officials genuinely believe, or professors, genuinely believe that they are so intelligent, way more intelligent and less biased and less bigoted than those Arab and Muslim officials, and that they know better. I've never seen in my life, and I'm speaking as a Hussein here, because it's obvious and it's not a good feeling. The amount of condescension is just morally infuriating in
Yes.
this way.
It's the bigotry of low expectations as well. Let me tell you one last thing. Churchill once said, I'm rephrasing, America will do the right thing, but after they're absolutely sure that nothing else is going to work. So let's hope.
Thank you all very much, all of our viewers were met. I'm sure you all enjoyed our webinar with Cynthia as much as I did. Please, as I said, consider donating to Emet through our website, emetonline.org. We depend on your contribution. This webinar will be recorded, uploaded to YouTube and sent to you in an email after the webinar. Meanwhile, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in our next webinar.